first execution was recorded in the colonies in 1608, a great deal has changed with the death penalty. Captain George Kendall was the first person to be executed in the Jamestown colony, where he was hanged for treason. By the start of the American Revolution, the death penalty was used in all 13 colonies for various crimes. The form of execution throughout the 1800s was hanging. Often these were held as public executions where sometimes tens of thousands of eager viewers would attend. Local merchants would even sell souvenirs and alcohol. It wasn't until around 1833 that states began switching to private hangings. 10 years later, the first National Death Penalty Abolition Society was formed, and shortly thereafter, Michigan became the first U.S. state to abolish capital punishment. In the next few years, other states followed in suit. In the 1880s, Thomas Edison began demonstrating the power of electricity by electrocuting animals such as dogs and cats, and even Topsy the elephant. In 1890, New York performed the first execution by the electric chair. The condemned was William Kemmler, and the process was hardly quick or painless. It took 2 surges of electricity, one of them lasting more than a minute, to kill Kemmler. Despite the gruesome procedure, people still thought electrocution was more humane and efficient than previous methods, and it became the preferred method of execution in the United States. In 1972, in Thurman v. Georgia, the Supreme Court ruled the death penalty unconstitutional as administered and overturned over 600 death sentences. The Thurman decision invalidated the death penalty statutes in several states. 35 states responded to this ruling by using Thurman as a guideline for developing a constitutionally acceptable statute. During this moratorium, hundreds of sentences were commuted to life imprisonment. 4 years later, the U.S. Supreme Court reaffirmed the constitutionality of the death penalty in Gregg v. Georgia. The ruling in Gregg v. Georgia gave other states the green light to implement the death penalty as long as juries received adequate guidance. Firing squads, electrocution, and hanging remained the methods of execution until 1982, when an Oklahoma medical examiner named J. Chapman proposed that death row inmates be executed using 3 drugs. Chapman's proposal was approved by state legislature the same year and was quickly adopted by other states. Texas became the first to use the new procedure. In 1987, controversy came about when a landmark study was published in the Stanford Law Review. The study documented 350 cases of defendants convicted of capital crimes in the U.S. between 1900 and 1985 who were later found to be innocent. In the decade following the publication of that study, scores of additional death row inmates were discovered to have been falsely convicted, largely through the emergence of DNA evidence. With DNA testing becoming more widespread across the country, Kirk Bloodsworth became the first American who spent time on death row to be exonerated with DNA testing in 1993. Since then, DNA has exonerated 329 people in post-conviction cases. In 2004, states such as New York began ruling the death penalty unconstitutional and outlawing it. Many European countries had long since abolished the death penalty, and in 2007, the United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution calling for a moratorium on the death penalty. One complicating factor of the death penalty in the U.S. was the unexpected drug shortage that our country has been facing. In 2010, lethal drug shortages delayed executions in Kentucky. A year later, the sole U.S. maker of the anesthetic used in executions announced that they would stop manufacturing sodium thiopental to prevent its products from being used to put prisoners to death. As a response, California officials imported a large quantity of the drug necessary to carry out about 90 executions from a British distributor, which led to a public outcry in Britain, leading to a ban on export of the drug to the United States. Due to the lack of available drugs needed in order to properly implement lethal injection and avoid botched executions, states have returned to other means to carry out the death penalty. In 2014, Tennessee passed a law allowing the state to electrocute death row inmates if unable to obtain the necessary lethal injection drugs, and on March 23rd of this year, Utah reinstated the use of firing squad for execution when unable to obtain proper drugs. Support for the death penalty has gradually been dwindling over the years, with growing controversy about its constitutionality and morality. Various questions have been raised about wrongful convictions due to race, misidentification, inadequate defense, social standings, economic statuses, and so much more. Since 1973, over 150 people have been exonerated from death row, proving the flaws of our criminal justice system. The death penalty and criminal justice system have been continually changing throughout the years and will continue to do so. Changes that have taken place could have affected numerous cases' outcomes if they were to be tried again today. Hopefully, future changes will eliminate people being wrongly convicted and executed.